I thought for this experience and perspectives kind of thing, I would give a little bit of background on myself and how I got involved in the arts in San Diego, and how I ended up at Bread and Salt. Because what we do here is kind of unconventional, and the whole way that I got here is just, it's not by chance, but it has just developed over time. So I think if I tell a bit about my background, it'll kind of make more sense. So I think a big pivotal moment for me, I grew up in East County and Lakeside. I still live out there. But growing up out there, I considered it to be a little bit more on the rural side for San Diego. I grew up across the street from the rodeo grounds. It's the only rodeo left in Southern California. And I grew up, 100 yards away from it, and also went to high school on the campus that has the rodeo grounds and has an agriculture setting. So growing up out there, not having access to galleries or museums or anything was pretty strange environment. And also being an artist, it left me wanting to find a lot more as far as the arts. And it wasn't until I found out about Grossmont College, which I talk about how important Grossmont was for me all the time, and the community college network. Growing up out there, the trolley didn't even run, and still doesn't run to Lakeside, but the trolley didn't even run out there. So even getting downtown was a really hard thing to do to get a job or whatever, and still is if you don't own a car. But I guess where I'm going with that, having access to Grossmont College, the first thing I did when I really wanted to get more involved in the arts was go to Grossmont College, and they didn't require any general education documents. You could just go and take an art class and just really start there. So I started taking drawing 1 and 2D design, 3D design. My goal was to take painting classes. I really wanted to be a painter. So taking painting classes, painting 1 and 2 and all that stuff. And I went there and showed for the first time at the Grossmont College original gallery, the original Hyde Gallery. That was a big deal for me. But then after that, moving downtown and meeting other artists was this other pivotal moment. And in around 2004, I met the ICE gallery guys, the guys that helped start ICE with me, or our version of ICE. I met Joseph Hoopert and Michael James Armstrong and Lee Levy. We were part of this collective that initially was called Seven, and we were having no luck showing our work in San Diego. That no galleries were asking us to do anything, and so we thought it would be this thing where as a whole, we could get a lot more done to show our work. So we started meeting every Sunday, and we called it Art Night. And a lot of us had studios at what was called the Brokers Building on Market Street, and I think it was 3rd. And across the street from our studios was a coffee shop that was open 24 hours. And we would meet there every Sunday. We'd all leave our studios and go hang out at the coffee shop and have what we called Art Night, sharing our ideas and talking about art. And that turned into the group of 6 of us. It was called 6. We kind of shopped around this group show idea to a few local places, R3 being one of them, which was a small space on India. And then also on Broadway, which was a place called, I think it was called Ronis and Associates. It's next to Influx. So, there weren't any galleries around at that time. So we were kind of just trying to figure out a way to work as a collective and support each other in the arts in San Diego. It was kind of a desert back then compared to now as far as being able to show work. That group, we continued to meet every Sunday for 10 years and talk about art. And the group was totally open for anybody to come and hang out with us and just talk about stuff and share ideas. And that really was a huge educational experience for art to me. That's really where I got a lot of my education, along with in 2005, I started working at the Museum of Contemporary Art, first as a guard, and being able to experience all the exhibitions from a guard's perspective was pretty wild, being a young artist. And then really soon after, I was able to get in with the art handling crew through a friend of a friend. And I stayed at the Museum of Contemporary Art from 2005 to about 2015, working on the prep crew, the preparator crew. And in that time, the museum, MCASD, had expanded to downtown and opened a brand new building. And I got to be part of all the first exhibitions there, working with artists from day one, like Jenny Holzer, or people like Robert Irwin. His 2007 survey that the museum did was like absolutely influential. And it led to a lot of really amazing things happening, like Michael James Armstrong from Ice Gallery beginning to work for Robert Irwin full-time, and also Joseph Hooper, who started Ice Gallery with us, also started working for Robert Irwin full-time. So that experience of being able to work with professional artists and be around professionals in the industry kind of shaped everything I do these days, from installation to presentation to curatorial to, you know, you name it, to how we run our residency program. It really completely was influenced on how MCASD runs their ship there. And you know, there was a time in 2007 where I was renting studios. I'm kind of rambling, but in 2007, I had moved into Ice Gallery, which was an ice manufacturing facility in San Diego. And you'll hear a lot of stories from people in San Diego about their experience at Ice Gallery. I had gotten it, I'd gotten the space, I got the lease from an artist named Becky Shear, who was moving to San Diego, or to Chicago. And at the time, it was just studios, but it was an old ice manufacturing facility on 30th and Upas, where Underbelly Ramen is now. It was a space that I used as a studio with Lee Levy. And we were looking to show more of our own work, like we had been doing with that 6 group earlier on. And a few of the tenants left, and I had the lease in my name, and I was looking to have a space to show some of my stuff and also everybody else's. And the idea of opening the space back up as a gallery, which other artists had done in the past, Perry Vasquez and Roman DeSalvo and Allison Weiss, and the list just goes on and on about how Ice Gallery on 30th and Upas had exchanged hands and kind of bounced around and was so important. I had gotten that space and was paying rent on it. It was $500 a month. And I split it with a bunch of other people in the building. It was about 1,000 square feet. The roof was completely falling in, and we learned how to do a lot of repairs and construction just by trying to keep the space together. So Francisco, I have some photos from those earliest days of Ice Gallery. The idea was that we would kind of treat the space like we had learned in the Contemporary Museum. And we had all worked there on the prep crew at some point, and we learned everything. And I mean, everything that I still know today about installing artwork, I learned from the chief preparator at the time. Her name is Amy Parsley. She literally was instrumental in teaching all of us Ice Gallery guys, Lee Levy, Michael James Armstrong, Joseph Hooper, and myself, all how to do everything from paint a room to install a painting. So that's a Lee Levy solo show that we did. So the whole idea with the Ice Gallery days is that we challenged each other to do solo exhibitions. And it was all paid out of pocket for us. And the 4 of us, the 4 guys, would help each other install and make it all possible. So this is all kind of out of chronological order, some of these works that we'll see. But, You know, the gallery had a storefront window that opened on 30th Street, and it had big glass windows that were boarded up when we found it. And we took those boards off and started cleaning the space and polishing it and trying to make it look really nice. But this work that we're looking at is Lee Levy in I want to say it's 2011 or 2010. So you can see the original ice gallery size. And we kept the name Ice Gallery basically because it was an ice manufacturing facility and it just was the best name. So Ice Gallery is still around today. Michael James Armstrong runs it and kept the name. So you can see the front of the building. It opened to 30th Street and it had these big glass windows. And, you know, there were so many versions of exhibitions that we did in there, but that's when we first really started all challenging kind of curatorial ideas and everybody working independently and with each other to create these spaces. I love this image right here. It's kind of unbelievable what that building looked like. If you knew the secrets of how that building was held together, it was really held together by paint alone. That was what was holding that whole space together. But it really started this idea of artist-run space in my brain, and you know, what it really meant to be an artist running a space and really giving an artist full run of a space and letting them run with an idea and creating a work and doing stuff with it. So that piece is by Joseph Hoopert, and Joey started Ice Gallery with us at that time. I wish I put more images. That's the only image of it, but that piece is one of the most incredible artworks I think I've ever been able to be part of installing. And really very few people saw it, but I think it was in 2010 at our Ice Gallery location on 30th and Upas. Joey took the dimensions of the ceiling alone, and you can kind of see the quality of the roof there, the leaking roof, but he built and had manufactured these pillars that were dimensionally inspired by the space, and they had graphite powder polished in them by hand. So that structure is floating off the floor. It was attached to the ceiling, but it, at certain times of day, it really had this moment where it was just hovering in the space, especially if you were walking in from the outside or you're looking in the windows. So you can kind of see how airy that space was with the windows. And so if you think back to 2010 or so in San Diego, like, you know, we had no opportunity to show anywhere. All these other galleries that were around were really out of reach for us because we were nobody, basically. So we really wanted to do something ourselves and show everybody that we could really compete, I guess, you know. This is a show that I did probably in 2010 of some sculptures that I made. But I really think it shows how beautiful that space was too, with the windows and more of the scale of the room. So the kind of wild thing is that front space was our gallery, and in the back I had a studio that I shared with Lee Levy, and a few other people had studios in the back. That space was $500 a month on 30th and Upas. So it had really great sidewalk and storefront quality, and the way that everybody drove by, it really was on view in the neighborhood. And I really feel like it set the tone again for that neighborhood to be revitalized. And, you know, for good and bad, the building owners, I think, realized how, I mean, this is my opinion, I think Ice Gallery truly changed that block. If people had experienced that block in the past, it was very run down, and obviously that is probably why the rent was so cheap too. But in the back of our space too, there was a really great artist named Akamanchi, who is pretty well known in San Diego. He lives in Georgia now, I believe, but he was a really great artist. So this image in 2013, I guess backing up a little bit because I didn't put an image, in 2013, Ice Gallery, we finally got the notice that our building was going to get demolished. It was sold to an architect named Jonathan Siegel, who's a very well-known San Diego architect. And we had 30 days to leave the building, which was just, absolutely devastating after we put literally our blood, sweat, and tears and all of our cash into our ice gallery space, and we just had to vacate it. It was kind of unbelievable because it was my studio. I lived a block away. It was our gallery, and it was kind of our everything. So we had 30 days to leave, and we did. And there's a really great image. I wish I included it in here. I wasn't sure if we would have photos, but it's an image of Lee and I standing in front of Ice Gallery after it was a pile of rubble. And it happened within, it happened so fast the way the developer moved in, and it was gone. And an interesting thing happened, though, that kind of changed everything, and I think also was the start of Bread and Salt. In 2013, Jim Brown and his wife, Isabel Dutra, invited Ice Gallery to Bread and Salt and asked if we would do the first exhibition in the building. So they heard that our building was demolished, and they lived in the neighborhood too. So they had driven by and they had seen our shows from the outside. And so they asked us to do the first show in the building. So the images on the screen now are, this is Lee Levy's work. So Lee picked, Jim and Isabel let us pick any portion of the building we wanted to create work. And so Lee picked the upstairs space, which is now called Via International. And Lee made an artwork that involved all the found objects in the building. So he made this series of works with all these found gears that were part of the bread making apparatus in the building. And he created a large installation on the second floor of the building. So a lot of people that were around at that time in the art scene remember the first show at Bread and Salt. I mean, there were a lot of pop-up space or shows after that, but as far as I know, this was the very first art show that happened in the bread building, in the bread factory. And that's still Lee Levy. So you can just see kind of the condition of the building too. It was, some of the windows were boarded up or broken, and the wood floors, the condition of them. So if you look upstairs now, everybody should take a look up there. They're polished, all brand new. It's really, really changed a lot. So this piece that is there now, this is Joseph Hoopert. Joey was inspired by the tile geometry and the space, which we all were really doing these kind of works that were inspired by the space. And so this room that Joey did this installation in is now best practice. So these are some really cool shots of what best practice was before. And Joey did this piece. It's all made out of tape. So it's all hand applied tape on the tile with a pattern that progresses through the room. And it took him weeks to install this piece. We all paid for everything we did out of pocket. Bread and Salt provided the space. Jim and Isabel provided the space. I don't even know if the space was called Bread and Salt at that point. I think it was, but so you can see what best practice is now is that space. That's still one of their doors that they use in the background there, but it's a pretty cool insight into us playing around with, again, like more curatorial ideas and programming and a way to use space. So, and also, just looking at the way Joey made this piece is just kind of unbelievable, the amount of effort that he put into this piece for a one-night event, which it was a one-night event. It was pretty wild. And a lot of people did come, but it's how serious the Ice Gallery guys were at that time. We were all in, like monetarily and just everything. It was like we were so dedicated. It was such a special time. And that's a really great image. And you can see the walls were still covered in stainless steel and venting. That room was called the proofing room, where they would rise the dough in the bread factory. So the building was all still really raw. Yeah, it's a really pretty piece that not that many people saw. And that's Joseph Hoopert. This is a piece that I made for the show, and it's kind of hard to get an understanding of what it was, but I did include a photo of what it looked like before. So a lot of people recognize this space as our event space. It's Bread and Salt's event space now, but I was really just blown away by the brick wall. It just really told a story to me, and the building being so raw at that time, it really was a room that I was completely drawn to. So what I did, somebody had done a little bit of construction work in there, and they left a lot of stuff undone. So I removed a bit of plaster off that wall to continue to reveal some of the paint that was existing on the space. So the room was a white room, a white brick wall with a kind of gray, slate gray bottom line. And I took the mortar geometry, and there was a bit of banding that showed a different pattern. And so I masked that area of brick, and I had it sandblasted and created that red stripe. So it was an incredibly big project that it's kind of comical looking back about doing it. And I was lucky enough to have my uncle, who's had a sandblasting company at the time, come in and help me. So the crazy thing is, I had to sell my car to make that piece possible. Since we were paying for it all out of pocket, I had a car that was kind of my baby at the time, and it was a vintage Toyota Corolla that I had. It was a 1978 Corolla that I really loved. And I sold it to make that piece happen, just like the other guys were putting everything they had in it. I also did too, which was kind of funny looking back. I don't know what we were expecting to happen, but we were just all in. That's the kind of crazy thing when you think about the dedication we had at that time. So that bottom portion on the floor was all the sand that I left from the sandblasting of the red stripe out of there. The yellow lines were existing in the room. The line that's furthest to the left, I faux finished. I faux painted the left line, which still exists today, which is kind of funny. So the middle yellow stripe was an existing factory marker for machinery that they had there. And I wanted the proportion of the room to have this kind of conversation to bring you in. So I thought it needed another yellow line. So I painted that front yellow line to make it look worn in and look like the middle line. So it's kind of funny, if anybody comes today, you can get a better look at it. Like I used a wire brush and masking and different tools to scratch it all up and make it look like the middle line. So it's the biggest thing I've ever made, but also, to this day, it's funny, like it blends in so well, in my opinion, to that room. A lot of people think that it's just existing from the factory, and I don't like to tell people I made that piece, but I kind of quietly really enjoy that people love using it for commercial work or for photography or anything like that. So in this image too, you can see what Michael started to do. In this left-hand side, you can see the red room, which nowadays we call Not an Exit. Michael James Armstrong, who runs Ice Gallery now, was inspired by the shape of the room here and the portals, the windows and doors that were part of it. And you can see Bread and Salt was much different back then. There was no central courtyard. You're kind of looking right now into where the courtyard would be. That's a closed area. It was a closed room. So this is before Jim cut the roof off and cut the floor out. This is more of a detail shot of looking into Michael's piece. It's stretched fabric into a red room. The red that you see is Not an Exit painted this really deep red color. And the triangulation of that opening is what is now our gallery desk. It's hard to imagine all this stuff, but anybody that comes to Bread and Salt now can get a really good idea of what it is. So this is a scrim stretched and sewn on wires with lighting on the interior of it, creating this aperture that looks into a red room that's all lit by bulbs from the inside. So this piece is just unfathomable for a bunch of DIY people, I think, in San Diego. It's kind of mind-blowing that we did it all on our own budgets with no funding and really no backing other than Jim and Isabel letting us do whatever we wanted. I really love this piece that Michael did. And so that's our gallery office now. So anybody that comes by, you'll imagine to the left is our main gallery desk. So looking into that portal is not an exit. And that piece just glowed. It was like a beacon of the exhibition. You could see it all the way across the factory. And I think it's an incredible piece that Michael made. And it really did not have a long life. It only lasted a short while after the opening because the building was still being developed at that time. So, you know, they gave us one night basically for the opening, which is kind of crazy. So you can still see too, the floor there were demoed walls. The building was much different, very, very raw. Lots of machinery and stuff still around. So what an incredible piece that Michael did. This is going back to my piece, The Wall. I love this image on the bottom left where you can see how much sand from the sandblaster was there covering the floor. So this is what I say too. We didn't know what we were getting into. I'd never done any sandblasting before. I'd never hired a sandblaster. So pretty crazy. But I love that bottom right finished image of the piece. It is pretty special that they let us do such a wild thing. And I think at the time I told Jim, and I didn't know Jim at the time really, that I asked if I could sandblast the wall, and he was like, yeah. So that shows Jim's personality too. And, you know, just how open they were to us making something. They trusted us completely, which is pretty crazy. And I'm not sure. Oh, this goes way back. Sorry, the photos were out of order. This is Michael's, a piece that Michael made in, I think, 2010 or 11 at our original ice gallery space. But it does kind of, it's an inspiring piece that goes towards his ice gallery piece at Bread and Salt that we just looked at. So this is the ice gallery on 30th and Upas with the windows. Michael made this triangulation piece that looked into the ice gallery. What an incredible piece. In 2013, I was still working at the Contemporary Museum as I think I was a lead prep, they called it at that time, but you know, I got to work with really great artists during a Phenomenal exhibition it was a Getty initiative. It was called Phenomenal. And at that time, we got to meet people like Doug Wheeler and James Turrell and all these other really fantastic artists that took on big environments. And so I think we were really inspired by all those guys, Robert Irwin included, of course. At that time, or towards 2015, I was really looking to do more with my art and also try to figure out a way to make more work myself. And Jim and Isabel in 2015 asked me if I wanted to become their first artist in resident here at Bread and Salt. So that in 2015, I quit my job at MCASD, which was kind of another crazy maneuver to quit a really great job that I had for close to 10 years. And I was, you know, leading crews and participating on all these really fantastic exhibitions. I made a huge leap to quit my job. I cashed out my 401k, which was really dumb. I don't recommend it. I came here in 2015 to start the residency program off for them. And they were very generous and they let me keep that artist in residence studio for a year. And they also, towards the end of that time in the residency, they started hiring me to install some of their exhibitions just as an art handler or a prep. And after we started to create this idea of running the gallery here, they asked me to help them run it. So they gave me the title of curator, and also that meant running the building as a whole. So these days, since 2015, I've been working for Bread and Salt full time, or really being here full time, and helping install the shows and helping them create programming. So that meant keeping the residency program going and helping to pick artists and create a way for people to apply, and also picking the artists for the main gallery. So I guess when it comes to perspectives on how to curate, I always look back at all of my time as an artist first. So I always look to artists for what their inclination is for a show. And I really let them have full reign of what they want to do for an exhibition. And I really try to only jump in and manipulate an exhibition when it comes to like installation and safety, and also if they ask for help. But I really, when it comes to picking an artist, Pablo Castanedas, our current show included, I really want to let an artist run with the idea of doing a show and let them do what they do. I don't ever want to intervene. And that comes from me being an artist. And I think if you look back at all the exhibitions that we've done here since 2015, they're all solo shows for the most part. I really only want to focus on solo exhibitions. That's what we did at Ice Gallery. That's what Ice Gallery still does today. And there's nothing wrong with group exhibitions, but I really want to make sure that the artist really has their perspective and opinion included in a show. I think a lot of times curators can take a show out of an artist's hands, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, it's a curator's point of view about the art, and it's no longer about the artist. And I really want to make sure anything we do here is included in what the artist really wants to do, the look of the show, and everything. So I don't know if that totally explains the perspective of Bread and Salt, but I still look at us really also as an artist-run space. And nowadays, we are a new nonprofit. And I hope what that'll mean is more money for our Artist in Residence program. We just received our very first grant from a nonprofit called Impact that was closing their doors, and they gave us a $10,000 check to be used specifically for our Artist in Residence program. So we've had 2 artists in residence, Mensa Bay being the first one, who received $1,000, and Amal Amer, our current artist in residence, will be receiving $1,000 check. And moving forward, all of our next artists in residence will receive a check. So I'm really excited about what's going to happen in the future here. And hopefully you'll just be seeing more of what we do here, these more solo exhibitions and celebrating our artist in residence program.